it's certainly a lot easier to not shout at yourself in your head all the time when you know that you're different rather than broken. It's a very big thing to realize that you're not broken, you're just different. And if you ask a penguin to fly, it's not going to manage it, but you ask them to swim and they're going to be brilliant at it.
Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right in your career and still couldn't figure out why it didn't feel like success? I've been there when I was leading engineering teams, and I thought that the next promotion, the next title would make it all click. But what I learned is that growth isn't a straight line. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes the bravest move is to step sideways or even step back. And you know, one of the roles I took, I was stepping down from leading around like 25 engineers in multiple locations, and I had managers reporting to me, and I moved to a startup to manage 6 engineers. But sometimes you know that you need to do this step back in order to make a leap forward. And this week's episode of From a Woman to a Leader, I talk with Meri Williams. Meri is an accomplished CTO, technology leader, and a chair at LeadDev. Actually, this week I am at LeadDev. And Meri shares her journey from scaling massive organizations and managing burnout to discovering that they are neurodivergent and learning to lead with authenticity, empathy, and boundaries. And we explore what real leadership looks like when you are trying to fit the mold, and how success can look differently for each of us. So if you question whether you're on the right path, if you wondered if you have to sacrifice yourself to grow in your career, I think this episode will change how you think about leadership. And for those who don't know me, hi, my name is Limor Bergman Gross, and I am an executive coach and the host of this podcast, From a Woman to a Leader, where we talk about real stories of growth, courage, and impact from women and non-binary leaders in tech. So tune in, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear that their path, however unconventional, is still leadership. So are you ready? Let's dive right in. Hi, Meri, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited. I mean, for those of you, our listeners who don't know, we met in London in March. And the minute I saw you on stage, Meri, I felt, wow, I have to talk with her. You are an incredible speaker, and you really touched me, to be honest.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. It's lovely feedback.
So, for those of you who don't know, Meri is a CTO, and I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit and what you do. And I would love us to talk about how you became a CTO and how can women, we don't have enough women in CTO roles. How can women become CTOs?
Sure. So I'm Meri Williams. I'm CTO. I was previously CTO at Monzo, Helix, Moo, and M&S.com. So quite a wide variety of industries. And I suppose I became a CTO in a slightly weird way. I started my career at Procter & Gamble, and I did 10 years in what I would call corporate IT. So I was a project and program and product manager for a while. I led engineering teams for a while. I ran the largest SAP install in the world, but I'm okay now, and that kind of stuff. And then I realized that I was a little further away from tech than I wanted to be. I'd studied computer science. I wanted to be an engineer, and I really wanted to get back to software. And so I left, and I was going to go to either Google or Amazon. And then this guy called Tom Loosemore rang me up and said, hey, we're going to fix the government. Come help us do that instead. And so I joined something called the Government Digital Service that built gov.uk, which for anybody who's in the UK, if you've used a government service and it wasn't terrible, that's because GDS exists, because they really brought agile ways of working and user-centric ways of developing services into government in the UK. And that was a really interesting ride for me. We went from 30 to 300 people in 9 months, which is
Wow.
intense scaling.
This
And
is crazy.
I had 80 direct reports at one point, 81 to 1 a
What?
month is quite a lot. And that was a real intense period and quite a tough gig, to be honest. But then I became known in London for being one of the people who could scale teams rapidly. My first ever CTO gig I did was a really tiny one. So I was CTO of a tiny health tech startup. Um, it actually went horribly wrong. We collectively resigned over ethical concerns, which is a story for another day. But the team I'd formed wanted to stick together, and so we stuck together and formed a little product studio. And then Marks and Spencer were our first big customer, and so over time they convinced each of us to go in house, and so I ended up as leading the digital side of M&S and being CTO for M&S.com, working for a guy called Carl McGinn, who's really fantastic. He went on to lead Facebook at work, and he was at Google for a while. He's now at eBay, but he was really the person who gave me my first big chance to. I'd led quite large organizations at P&G. I'd had a team of about 300 there and a $100 million budget at one point, which was ridiculous for a 27-year-old. But this was my first chance in a true CTO role at a large scale, and I very grateful for him for seeing that in me and giving me the opportunity to step up. And then I've been in different CTO roles ever since, essentially.
Wow. I mean, I'm blown away. I'm completely blown away, Meri. And how did you manage 80 people? I mean, you told me that I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, I cannot even imagine something like that. And how did you scale so quickly? I mean, how do you do that?
So managing 80 people was very difficult. I worked very long hours because obviously every time you have a one-to-one, even if it's just a half-hour one-to-one, there's things you need to do afterwards. There's follow-ups and there's other stuff to do. So 80 one-to-ones in a month, even if they were half-hour, was still a very significant portion of my month. There was also obviously other meetings and things to do, and so I got very good at taking notes. I got very good at running one-to-ones, and I worked too much and actually probably burnt out a little bit because of it. So when I said earlier it's something I wouldn't do again, I'm very serious. I definitely wouldn't ever manage that many people again. But it meant that I really had that personal experience of pushing the boundaries of how many people was reasonable to look after. And so I've got quite strong opinions now that engineering managers should look after 12 to 15 people. More than that is really too challenging for someone to do anything in addition to people management. And I do think that engineering managers want to have some involvement in the team and their delivery and shipping of products and those kind of things as well. I experimented for a while with pure people management engineering manager roles. And on the one hand, they do work. You can maximize the potential of a lot of people by having great managers, but it's not very fulfilling for the engineering manager themselves if they're completely divorced from all of the work of the team and the shipping of product and platform that the team is doing. And so I'm sort of swung back to a more balanced view at this point. In terms of how we scaled that fast, it was a mix. So we hired a lot of people permanently and really streamlined the process a lot in order to make that good. We were very explicit about what we valued and how we were going to work, and that working that way was really important to show the rest of government that agile ways of working and modern software engineering and modern product development could be successful. And so we onboarded people in a very comprehensive way. But we also partnered with some key partners who had good experience building in a positive way as well. So we used ThoughtWorks and people like that to augment our teams to have not just the capability and capacity, but also the way of working to instill that in everybody that they worked with. And ThoughtWorks in particular are quite good at that. They're good at not just doing the work, but showing how to do the work at the same time and pairing with your engineers and your product people and your designers and your data people and helping them to do the work in a really modern, agile way, as well as to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's not easy to hire good people. even if the market, right, is full of people looking for a job, it's always like very time consuming.
Yeah, hugely. And one of the things that was positive at the government digital service was that it was quite famous in London at the time. So people did want to join and they were keen and they were even willing to accept that, the salaries weren't amazing by tech standards because they were government salaries. But it was, this movement almost, or, it was not just about employer branding. It was about being part of a change that was happening at the time. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people got excited about that and really wanted to be a part of it. And that helped us in hiring. We also streamlined the process quite a lot and had to make sure that it fitted with the civil services way of hiring, but also was fit for purpose for what we needed. Because the UK government till that point hadn't hired that many software engineers or designers or product people. So it was quite a new frontier for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you become a CTO? I mean, tell us how you do that. I mean, especially, I can share, from being a woman. I mean, it's really, I thought it was really hard and I didn't see a lot of role models. I mean, and you seem to done that so many times and at a very young age. So what's kind of
Yeah.
your take on that?
So I think my route was a weird one, as I said earlier. I think I did
Yeah.
a sort of 20-year career in 10 years at P&G, and a lot of that was I was staying in one place, and so they knew me, they trusted me, they probably gave me more opportunity than I could have had anywhere else because I had this track record within the company. And I was really lucky early on. I had some really great role models at P&G. There were my first director was a woman who I'm still in touch with today. She's one of my favorite people. She's a fantastic mentor, a woman called Michelle Hughes, and she went all the way up to senior vice president at P&G, which is incredibly senior in a company that size.
Yeah.
She was there for 33 years, I think, in total. Because P&G has a lot of people that stay a really long time. It's a kind of,
Yeah.
it's when I joined anyway, it was still a kind of job for life kind of environment, and so I
Yeah.
think that was very positive. And so I think I did it sort of upside down. I did a lot of the leadership development and the people management very early and those kind of things. I think a more typical route to CTO is to become an engineering manager or a principal engineer, and then to become an engineering director, a VP of engineering, so take on bigger and bigger teams, move from managing individual contributors to managing managers, and then to move into a CTO role. But I think one of the things I talk about quite a lot, I've got a talk I do called career vectors, which is all about the fact that there's different flavors of CTO, right? I'm somebody who does just as much tech strategy as I do people leadership, but there are
Mm-hmm.
definitely CTOs who are all over the people leadership and not doing very much technically. There are also CTOs who are almost like a chief architect. They're very technical and they don't do the people management side of things. And so I think it's also a bit about figuring out what type of CTO role you want and what type of organizations are likely to have that kind of role. And I think probably the most common is the sort of role that I do, where you are doing technology strategy and delivery and people management, and you're to a great extent a sort of general executive as well. You're just one of the executive team that needs to represent the company just like anybody else does. Um, but then, if you want to be the more architect type of CTO, then you probably will look for different opportunities than if you want to be the more people manager type CTO, and so on. And there's essentially these sort of 6 vectors that you need to figure out. It's like a graphic equalizer. How much do you want to move the lever on each of them? But those are, technical depth, technical strategy, delivery, getting shit done, people leadership, commercial, and then domain specific. And that domain specific one, I didn't used to think mattered that much when I worked in quite easy to understand domains like e-commerce or manufacturing. But then I went to Helix, which was AI driven drug discovery, and just realized that there was this massive gap in my knowledge. So they used AI to find drugs that already existed that could be reused for rare diseases. And I have a rare disease, so I knew a lot as a patient about that process, but I didn't know how drugs got discovered and how drugs went from being an idea or a compound to, something that a patient could take. And so I ended up doing a kind of skill swap with the chief science officer, where I taught him a load about AI and technology, and he taught me a load about how pharmaceutical development works, and what the different phases were of testing, and pre-clinical and clinical, and all of these kind of things. And so that role was the one that really made clear to me how sometimes the domain knowledge is hugely important as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I just talked to someone actually before our call that she moved, with different domains. So how much, so I kind of, it's when you talked, a question came to my head. How important is it, especially in executive roles, to be really an expert in a specific domain? I don't have a specific answer to that. I would curious to hear you.
I think it varies. So, I think when I worked in e-commerce, it didn't matter that much because everybody can imagine and conceptualize how e-commerce works quite easily. Like, there are definitely things that you learn working in e-com, and it does help to have more depth and more expertise, but it's not essential. Whereas the fintech roles and the health tech roles that I've done, it's much more important. So, in my role now, I work at Pleo, and we're a Danish fintech. We've just had to get our license in the UK as well because of Brexit. So it matters now that I understand the detail of what the regulators expect and what the Financial Conduct Authority wants, and all of those kind of things as well. And so there is this depth that is necessary, and more necessary in certain industries than in others, I think. And so for some industries, you kind of have to get started quite early in order to have the depth that's needed in order to get there, or you have to be very good at switching into a new domain and very quickly learning everything that you need to learn.
Yeah, but a lot of times you don't know if you want a specific industry, right? You kind of stumble across different opportunities, you take them and you figure out, oh, I like that, and you don't know if you want to stick around, and kind of color yourself with like, oh, I'm in security, or I'm in, whatever that fintech or whatever that may be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same. My wife's an architect, like a real one. She builds hospitals, and that's a similar thing. She kind of fell into working on healthcare architecture. She just happened to get some projects that were related to healthcare early in her career, enjoyed them, and now she's an expert in healthcare architecture. She builds hospitals and labs and mortuaries and all sorts of things. She's building a big cancer research center at the moment, and that's a really specialist area of architecture. But at university, she didn't know that that's what she wanted to do, and it was almost an accident that she ended up specializing in it. But now it's very fulfilling and very much what she wants to do. And I think that happens to a lot of people. I think I've never had a 5-year plan for my career. I've always just made the best choices I could make at every intersection, and that's been good enough. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a 5-year plan. It's fantastic if you can think that far ahead, but a lot of times it's just about traversing the options before you in the best way that you can, and making the best choices you can given what you know.
Do you have any regrets, if that's okay that I'm asking?
Loads of regrets, and loads of learning over the years as well. There's a couple of roles I would have liked to do for longer. There's a couple of roles where I would have made the scaling go a little slower if it had been feasible. But in the sort of zero interest rate environment we were in at the time, it was really important to grow really, really fast. There was lots of pressure from investors to do that. I regret a little bit that I got forced into management so early in my career. So there was a reality when I was early in my career that the only way up was to become a manager. And so I became a manager very young, very early. I was in my early 20s. And my first 2 direct reports were older than my dad.
Wow.
And I just imagined my father's reaction if he had a manager his daughter's age. That wouldn't have gone down well. And they were very affectionately known as Statler and Waldorf, who are the 2 old men in the Muppets who sit up on the balcony and yell at everybody.
Yeah.
And I remember I remember the first time they brought a big issue to me, and they were sat the two of them sort of arms folded, very skeptical. I was another new young manager they had to put up with. And they, one of them had been in the company. I did the presentation for his 30-year service award, and I was 24 at the time. So,
wow.
That there's a certain style of those presentations where you go, on this day in history when Ian joined the company, the following things were happening. This is what was going on in history at the time. And I was like literally researching stuff that was 6 years before I was born in order to to figure out what to say at his thing. But I remember them bringing me this issue, and they went, "This is going to break." And I went, "Ah, shit, if that breaks, then this is screwed too, right?" And I remember the moment that they kind of went, "Ah, this one understands, okay." And they sort of unfolded their arms and leaned forward and solved the problem with me. But it was definitely a test, and I was very lucky that I was technical enough to pass that test, because I think if I hadn't, I would have been in a really awkward situation with both of them for a really long time. But it worked out quite well. But yeah, I think if at the time there had been a choice to become a staff engineer or a principal engineer, or to stay on that individual contributor track for longer, I think I would have taken it. I don't think I'm very naturally suited to people management or leadership, and so it's been a lot of work to get good at that stuff. And I think I would have enjoyed my time more if I'd been able to stay in IC a bit longer. So that's probably my big career regret, is that wasn't possible when I was coming up through the ranks.
Definitely, and I'm sure that you are a natural leader, to be honest with you, Meri, because otherwise you wouldn't have been in leadership roles in so many companies and succeeded as you succeeded.
I don't know. So if about 5 years ago, I found out that I've got autism and ADHD, and it just made it was a really interesting process to discover that. And one of the side effects of that was that I realized how intellectual my understanding of people is. So I'm constantly running a Monte Carlo simulation in my head of like, what does your face mean? Why are you making that expression? What is the emotion that comes with that? And I don't think I read those things very naturally. I think I'm analyzing the whole time. And my psychiatrist that diagnosed me said, "Your brain's fascinating," when I explained to him what I was doing. And he just was amazed that I wasn't exhausted all the time, because he was like, "It just sounds so tiring to have to run these simulations constantly in order to understand the people around you." But it's just the way it's always been for me. So I don't know any better. I don't know any different. It's amazing to me that there are people who can just tell what somebody's thinking or how they're feeling from, without having to analyze, without having to think about it. But for me, it's this very active process where I have to really, assess and analyze what people are thinking and what their face is doing and how their tone is changing and all of those kind of things. So I don't think it's very natural for me, but I suppose it's proof that you can learn anything if you need to.
I'm sure it is a proof you can learn anything, and actually maybe perhaps because it doesn't come naturally to you and you work so hard, you're more intentional about it and you make the effort.
I hope so. I hope it has a...
I'm sure you are. I mean, it's so difficult to read people. I don't think anyone can read people.
Yeah.
And it takes time and practice to really, as you said, like to analyze the things that are not actually being said in words, but to kind of see how people talk, as you said, their tone of voice, their expressions, what do they tell? And it seems like you're doing that very intentionally, which makes me think you're actually doing that probably better.
Maybe.
It's kind of the opposite way of thinking about it, right?
Yeah, maybe.
What led you, by the way, to diagnose yourself with autism?
I had, it's a weird story. I was struggling to sleep well, and I gave up coffee. And I was drinking probably 7 double shot coffees a day at the time, so 14 shots a day of espresso, which was not great for my sleep. And I gave up coffee for 6 months and I became unproductive. And I'd never been unproductive in my life. I'd never had a to-do list I couldn't blast through or a deadline I couldn't meet. And it really shook me because I was so used to being very high performing and very highly productive that this moment when I just couldn't get shit done was really unsettling. And I ended up in a bit of a crisis because my self-worth was so entwined with my work, and everything of who I was all about how I did at work. And so I ended up at this, thankfully, a very good psychiatrist who treated quite a lot of people who had mid-career trouble, and then many of them found out mid-career that they were neurodiverse. So he's kind of a neurodiversity specialist. I'd suspected for a long time I was autistic. I'd managed enough people with autism that I was like, this is quite familiar. I think this is partly I'm getting on so well with these people because they're quite like me. But the ADHD was completely out of left field. I had no idea. So it was really a sort of crisis moment that led me to that diagnosis. And I'm very glad it did because I'm on meds now for the ADHD. I take melatonin at night for the sleep, and I'm in a much better place than I was 5 years ago as a result of that.
Wow, that's good. And sometimes just to have a diagnosis and know why certain things happen to you is a relief. I can only imagine.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot easier to not shout at yourself in your head all the time when you know that you're different rather than broken. It's a very big thing to realize that you're not broken, you're just different. And if you ask a penguin to fly, it's not going to manage it, but you ask them to swim and they're going to be brilliant at it.
For sure. And I think today more people are diagnosed and there is more awareness of neurodiversion.
100%.
Yeah. And on top of that, I mean, you told me that you also suffer from a disease and kind of, work 4 days a week. So are you willing to share?
Yes, sure. So I have something called Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. I got diagnosed in 2012. It's hereditary, so it's a genetic disease, and it basically makes all of my collagen malform. So your collagen is meant to be a very tight mesh, and mine is this very loose mesh. So my tendons and ligaments and skin and everything that's made of collagen in my body is structurally inadequate. So it's all too bendy. And that results in quite a lot of different symptoms. It causes POTS and lots of problems with your internal organs because there's lots of collagen in your internal organs. But the most obvious symptom is that all my joints dislocate. And so I wake up every morning with dislocated joints, have to put them back in before I can get up and face the day. And that's been the toughest thing, to be honest, because it's very painful. It obviously, I only got diagnosed because my shoulder dislocated 100 times in a year. So it was dislocating multiple times a month for a year. And then they worked out that there was a tear in my shoulder socket, but they basically can't operate on it because the stitches will just come out because of the collagen not being tight enough. And so, yeah, it's been a very interesting road. And yeah, I've been 4 days a week since Moo. So I've done most of my CTO roles. I have been 4 days a week, and I still do the full role. But what I found was that I would be unwell, and I'd wake up with a really badly dislocated shoulder or hip or knee, and I would still struggle into work on crutches or with a sling on or whatever else, because I'd look at my calendar and just go, if I don't go to work today, the first time there's room to reschedule these meetings is 3 weeks away, 4 weeks away, because my calendar was so full all the time.
Yeah.
And I just went, I can't delay these decisions for 3 or 4 weeks. That's not fair to the people who need decisions from me or need me to say yes to something or approve a budget, or, there was almost every day there was something that was a decision meeting. And so I started taking Mondays off. And that meant that if I was sick on another day than a Monday, I could at least take the day off. And the longest anybody had to wait was a week. And that was much more acceptable. So it's almost like a fire break in my schedule. And so quite often I will still have some work to do on a Monday or some meeting that needs to happen. But it just gives me that bit of flex and that bit of ability to be more resilient and to take the time when I need the time. And I think that's quite different. I think the reality is on a 4-day schedule, you end up doing the full job. I don't think anybody's good enough at dividing up work to give you an 80% job. And so I think that reality is that I end up doing the full CTO role. I just do it in a slightly different way than other people might.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, your disease sounds super painful.
Yeah.
And so sorry to hear that. And it's really inspiring to see how you are, first of all, talking about it so naturally and sharing that. So thank you for that. And also how you're able, despite all the challenges, to really succeed and grow and do so many incredible things. And you don't let anything stop you. So
yeah. I mean, my wife would tell you I don't have a flight response. I only have a fight response. I used to be a bouncer in my university years, and so she would tell you it's a pro and a con that I react to everything as if I've got to face it. I've got to go for it. I'm stubborn as hell, but I think it's helped me in my career to be stubborn.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else you would like to share with our audience today?
I mean, the other big thing that I'm super proud of and that I'm involved in is LeadDev, which is a leadership conference disguised as a technology conference. And so we run in London, Berlin, New York, and San Francisco. And I really love the community that's formed around this conference because it's a bunch of people who really care about doing engineering leadership well, who really care about their people, who are tech leads and eng managers and senior software engineers and staff and principal and directors and VPs, like all the way up and down, CTOs, but who really get the people side of software. And so that's the other thing I'm really proud of having been involved with. It's our 10th anniversary this year for the London conference, and so it's called LDX3, and it's in June. So that's the only other thing I'd mention that I'm super proud of being involved in.
You should. Congratulations, and hoping to meet you in one of those.
Yeah, for sure. That would be awesome.
Are you traveling to all of them, or?
So I tend to I used to travel to all of them and I used to host all of them, but then it got a bit too much to do that much travel, in addition to a full-time CTO role. And so these days I just host London, and then I'm involved in programming the other conferences, and I tend to go to Berlin as well because it's just a short flight away from London.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow, you're so inspiring. And thank you so much, Meri, for your time today. Before we go, tell our listeners how they can find you.
So I'm on LinkedIn. If you search for Meri Williams, my name's spelt a bit weirdly. It's Meri. Williams is spelt normally. I am technically still on Twitter as geek_manager, but I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter anymore because it's gotten so toxic. And then I'm on most other social media stuff. I'm on as geek_manager, so Instagram and things like that.
Perfect. I'll make sure to put all the links there. Thank you so much, Meri, for being here with me today.
This has been really awesome. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Meri. And I hope it helped you and you resonated with it. And I would love to hear from you. What resonated the most with you? So feel free to message me on LinkedIn or Substack. Drop a quick comment here to let me know. And before you go, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. And I think this episode is for every ambitious working mom. Every ambitious working mom needs to hear it. And I'm sitting down with Kiara Curtin. She's an executive career and wellness coach. And she helps ambitious mothers to step into executive leadership, increase their earning potential, and build wealth without burning out or sacrificing family life. And Kiara and I talk about what it really takes to break through the middle management ceiling and why women hesitate to ask for more, resonate deeply with me because I've been there, and how to shift from guilt and burnout to clarity and power. Trust me, you want to save this episode and share it with every woman in your circle who is ready to own her ambition. So, thank you so much for listening for today's episode, and I'll see you next week on From a Woman to a Leader. Bye!